in a Bible code.
Isaac Newton was certain there was a hidden code in the Bible. He desperately tried to find it. He learned Hebrew and spent more than half of his life searching for the Bible code. Most of the million or more words in Newton's own handwriting had nothing to do with mathematics or astronomy, but rather esoteric theology. It was clear from the writings that Newton believed that there was a prophecy of human history hidden in the Bible.
Newton was certain the Bible, in fact, the entire universe, was, quote, a cryptogram set by the Almighty. But the secret of the Bible code, if indeed it existed at all, eluded the great scientist. Have modern scientists actually found the code? Can computers succeed where men have failed? How did the greatest tragedy in Jewish history set the stage for the scientific investigation of the Bible code? By the time of the Second World War, cryptanalysis, the art of making and breaking codes, was well on its way to becoming a science. A small group of Polish mathematicians had broken the supposedly unbreakable German Enigma code in 1934. When America entered the war, the fledgling U.S. Signal Corps, later the National Security Agency, was able to keep one step ahead of the code, giving Allied generals and admirals advanced knowledge of German strategy. But in order to keep up with the constantly mutating code, they had been forced to devise some means of making huge numbers of calculations. What they came up with was a huge mechanical calculator they called a computation machine. These computation machines made cryptanalysis a viable science. Meanwhile, Rabbi Michael Bar Wiesmandel, a childhood Talmudic and mathematical prodigy in Czechoslovakia prior to World War II, survived the Holocaust and after the war emigrated to the United States. Wiesmandel, while still a young man, had stumbled onto the notes of the 13th century rabbi Bachya, suggesting that divine information could be derived from the Torah by means of skipping a specific interval of letters. Now, with all the horror of the Holocaust behind him, Wiesmandel returned to the fascination of his youth, the possibility of a mysterious Bible code.
Rabbi Wiesmandel, through his diligence and determination in his studies of the Torah, made some remarkable discoveries. In the book of Genesis, if you go to the first equivalent of a T and count 49 letters and then take the next one, in other words, the 50th letter is the equivalent of what we would consider a Vav. It's what we would consider an O. You count another 50 letters, it's a Resh, or like our R. You count another 50 letters, and you come to a Hey, or like an H. In other words, it's as if you found a T-O-R-H at 49 letter intervals. It spells the word Torah. Rather remarkable in its own right, but one of those things you could dismiss as just a happenstance. But when you get to Exodus, you discover the same thing happens. You come to a T, 49 letters plus one, you get to the O, the R, and the H the same way. And so again, this starts to look very designed. In fact, it's rather interesting that this number 50 are the number of days from the Exodus to the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. In pursuing this further, you go to the book of Leviticus, the third book, and nothing like this happens. But you go to the fourth book of the Torah, the book of Numbers, the same thing happens, but only if you spell Torah backwards. Kind of weird. You go to the book of Deuteronomy, again you find the equivalent thing, but only if you spell it backwards. Now, you wonder, what does this mean? And you stand back from it all. It's as if those four books are pointing to the middle book, two forward, two back, to the book of Leviticus. So you examine Leviticus more carefully, and you discover not 49 letter intervals, but 7 letter intervals. You have the word Yahweh, or the name of God. And you stand back from this whole thing and you realize the Torah is always pointing to the name of God. Rabbi Wiesmandel's discovery is the first modern hint of hidden codes in the Bible.
It was the 50-year-old discovery of Rabbi Wiesmandel that finally convinced a small group of Israeli scientists that computers might be the key that could unlock the centuries-old mystery of the Bible code. Dr. Eliyahu Rips devised a mathematical model to test the viability of the skip codes that Weismandl had demonstrated with his work. He enlisted the help of Dr. Doran Whitsom, a graduate student in physics specializing in general relativity, and Yoav Rosenberg, a brilliant young computer scientist. Together, they hoped to prove scientifically whether or not a Bible code existed. It would be a long and tedious undertaking. Let's take a moment here and explain exactly what an equidistance letter sequence, or ELS, code is and how it is constructed, with this simple example. Rips explained that each code is a case of adding every 4th or 12th or 50th letter to form a word. Skip X spaces and then another X spaces, and the hidden message is spelled out. This appears to be nothing more than a simple description of ELS coding, but if you begin with the first letter of the paragraph, R, then skip every 3 letters and pick up the 4th letter following, the coded message is revealed. What is infinitely more difficult than deciphering the code is the creation of a surface text that is sensible and easily understood, and yet will seamlessly accommodate specific letters at fixed intervals. In order to test the ELS code theory, the research team created a program according to strict scientific and statistical rules. The usable text would be only the book of Genesis, some 78,000 plus letters. In order to make certain the results could not be tainted by subjective interpretation, they selected the names of 32 of Israel's most famous sages as the target of their match. To make it more difficult, they also asked the program to search for either the target's birth date or death date. After months of work, the complex mathematical model and program was ready. Now it was up to the computer. The results of this test startled even the researchers. All 32 names were there, coded into the text, along with either their date of birth or their date of death. But that wasn't enough for Rips. He wanted further proof. In his final experiment, he took the 32 names and 64 dates the codes had revealed and jumbled them in 10 million different combinations so that 9,999,999 were a mismatch and only one was a correct pairing. Only the one correct name and date came together. The odds against this happening by chance, the researchers tell us, are literally 1 in 10 million. Enter Harold Gans, senior cryptologist for the National Security Agency in Maryland. Determined to prove the results were a fluke, he wrote his own program and added the names of 34 more prominent Jewish sages and the cities of their birth or death. What he discovered that fateful day at his office in Maryland was that all 66 names were there, firmly fixed in the code.
The results I got were even more significant than the original experiment done by Whitsom and Rips. At that point, I knew beyond any shadow of a doubt that the code was real. I felt a chill go up my spine.
Encouraged by the results, the study was sent to the prestigious American mathematics journal Statistical Science for peer review and possible publication. Robert Cass, the editor of the Statistical Science Journal and a professor at Carnegie Mellon University, is quoted as saying, "Our referees were baffled. Their prior beliefs made them think the book of Genesis could not possibly contain meaningful references to modern-day individuals. Yet when the authors carried out additional checks, the effect persisted. The paper is thus offered to statistical science readers as a challenging puzzle." Hidden from view for thousands of years, the information described by Bachya and so diligently sought by Weismandl and other Jewish sages was apparently being confirmed by an unlikely convergence of religion and science. In 1994, Michael Drosnin, a writer and former journalist, flew to Israel to meet with a close friend of then Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. He carried with him a letter with frightening implications.
About 2 years into my investigation, I found encoded the name of the Prime Minister of Israel, Yitzhak Rabin. The only time his name was encoded in the Bible, and crossing his name, as plain as day,